This is my last attempt to get through to the people of Israel, to prove to them that I am Yeshua HaMashiach, the second coming of Jesus Christ. But in order to do that, first I have to show you what this world really is and who's behind it. That in itself will prove that I'm Him, and it will also explain what I'm here to do. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, Jesus saves. Most people think it means that He's going to save you from your sins, but that's not it. Once you know the truth about this world, the real meaning of that phrase becomes clear. And the truth is, you are enslaved to an alien race. You are being ruled by the children of Satan, and they are among you. They're a race of dragons that have a polymorphic ability which allows them to change the size and shape of their bodies. They're shapeshifters, and they've used this ability to make themselves look like humans, to imitate us. That's how they've taken us over. Our enemies have become our masters. After all the shapeshifting and reversions I've shown, it should be obvious that these are physical beings that are physically transforming their bodies. They're not demons possessing human hosts or anything like that. They're not hybrids either, and they're not using holograms to make themselves look human. It's a dragon that has essentially liquefied its cells and then molded them into the shape of a human body. When they switch their cells to the fluid state, they can move them around and form them into any shape or texture, almost like living plastic. They can also change the characteristics of their cells, the size, hardness, elasticity, color, and so on. That's how they imitate human bodies. But it's only imitating the basic outward appearance, just what you see on the surface. It doesn't have the biological makeup of a human body. It's still a dragon with its original physiology, just reshaped and compressed to fit inside that human-shaped form. After I'd seen a number of these reversions, I noticed that they all matched the features of the newborn in Alien Resurrection, and now I know for certain that it's them. The individual playing the newborn hasn't reverted its horns or tail, and there's makeup and prostheses on its head, but the rest of its body is close to fully reverted, and looking at that, it's clear that it's a dragon. A bipedal dragon with a semi-humanoid body type. This is the monster that's hiding inside of those fake human forms. I saw a video on YouTube a few years back where some Australian guy was saying that he's a 10-foot-tall Arcturian. I didn't know what to make of that at the time. It seemed highly implausible that a 10-foot-tall alien could make itself look like a human. But as it turns out, he was telling the truth. And now I know that an Arcturian is a dragon, and they are about 10 feet tall.
You see, what we're talking about here is an organism that imitates other life forms.
An organism that imitates other life forms.
It has plate-like structures that extend out from its pelvis, which is a very unusual feature. That's what you're seeing with these wide hips. These pelvic reversions leave no doubt that they're not human at all. They have 2 hip joints for each thigh, and there are no buttocks, because that's where the base of the tail is. So it's not even remotely identifiable as a human pelvis. And yet these 2 different individuals have the same type of non-human pelvis. That's because they're the same non-human species. No matter what they look like as humans, their race, size, body type, male or female, they'd all turn back into 10-foot-tall hermaphroditic dragons, and you'd probably have a hard time telling them apart. If you looked at them up close, you might see some differences, but from a distance, they'd all look the same to you. There's the tail, though it would obviously be much longer and thicker when it's fully reverted. There are 2 bones in the thigh that branch apart as they go into the pelvis, and there's a hole in the middle that you can see through. The individual in the center frame is reverting the same inner bones, and you can see the holes beginning to form there.
imitates other life forms.
These things can imitate us, they can infiltrate us, and breed a legion before anyone would even notice.
It's imitation.
I could assume any form I wish.
As you can see, they also have horns. Of course, dragons are almost always depicted with horns, and that's why. This passage from Revelation is giving a physical description of the dragon's horns, and that's what we're seeing on Arnold Schwarzenegger. It looks like a ram's horn as it curls down at the end and is segmented. I've seen horns coming out a few times in person as well, but only as bumps at the top of the forehead.
This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to. but it's vulnerable out in the open.
It has a long foot with an elevated ankle, so it resembles the hind leg of a hoofed animal. That's why most depictions of Satan, like Baphomet and Pan, have goat's legs. They're shown with hooves because they have only 2 toes in their native forms, and you can see that in the frame on the left from Conan the Barbarian. When it's fully reverted, it'll also have talons, and 2 toes with talons looks like a hoof. All of these depictions have horns as well, and of course, those are dragon's horns. Baphomet is depicted as a hermaphrodite, a male creature with breasts, and you can see that the newborn has breasts. The rod is clearly a phallic symbol, so it must have a penis, and the snakes and scales mean that it's a reptilian creature, a hermaphroditic dragon that has a penis and mammary glands, and it would also have female reproductive organs, or something equivalent. As hermaphrodites, they can imitate male or female forms while retaining the sexual functionality of that gender. When they imitate one gender, the sex organs of the opposite gender are compressed and moved inside the body. So in their human forms, they're not really male or female. They're still hermaphrodites, just with one of the sex organs reduced. I'm sure you recognize the rods, snakes, and wings as the caduceus. This is where it comes from. It's symbolic of them. Baphomet's wings obviously represent an ability to fly, but I think it means flight from the use of technology, flying in craft. It's very unlikely that they have wings in their native forms. For a creature of that weight, it'd take a huge wingspan to sustain flight, far more than the length of the body. If they do have wings, the best they could do is glide short distances. They'd never be able to get off the ground on their own. The reason he's pointing at the moon is because that's how they arrived here. And that's where the head of their hierarchy resides, the elders of their race. The moon is actually a battle star, a mobile space fortress surrounded by a layer of rock. It's much too massive for the Earth to capture and hold in orbit. And it's actually the moon that's holding onto the Earth using a focused gravity field generated by technology. You could basically think of it as a tractor beam. They can also change its orbit at any time, and they do that fairly frequently, as some have observed. It should be obvious now that the moon is the eye in the sky, and also Lucy in the sky with diamonds, Battlestar Lucifer. The song Moonchild by Iron Maiden confirms some of the things that we know about them. The title itself tells you that they originate from the moon, which I just talked about. I am he. This means that they're all male. Again, I believe that they're actually hermaphrodites, but if you had to classify them as one or the other, you'd count them as male, since they all have penises. So these phallic symbols that you see around represent all of their kind. The bornless one. I'm not sure what this means. Maybe that they're not born as you typically think of it, that it's a different process. If they are hermaphrodites, then it would certainly be different from human reproduction. They would know what that means, but I can only guess. They're watching you, so that would mean that they're the Watchers, and the Whore of Babylon as well. That matches Revelation. It also talks about infiltrating, and we know that's how they operate. When you see someone making the horn's hand sign like this, it means that individual is a drac. As you know, they have horns in their native forms. Sometimes it may just be a clueless human, but that's the meaning of that sign. And by sticking out their tongues, they're telling you that they're reptilians. This is taking it a step further. The V sign means the same thing. It doesn't mean peace or victory. It means they're Dracs. Beyond that, I don't know what it symbolizes exactly. There's also the so-called Vulcan hand sign, which are the index and middle fingers together and the ring and pinky fingers together. And that's meant to show a hand with 3 fingers, because they have 3 fingers in their native forms, including the thumb, which you can see in the bottom middle frame. That's an Arcturian's hand in its fully reverted form. There are other hand signs, like the OK sign, which is 666, and both hands making a pyramid. Those are self-explanatory. The picture on the left is a Mayan relief which is showing Quetzalcoatl as a shapeshifter. The serpent isn't eating the man. The man is coming out of the serpent's mouth. It's depicting a creature that has 2 forms, one inside the other. And when the inner creature comes out, it changes into that form. So they were openly shapeshifting in front of the Mayans, showing themselves in their native forms. This must be why they buried those structures, because there's too much that shows what they are. The painting on the right is also depicting a shapeshifter by putting a man's head on a dragon's body. And they can do that in reality. Revert the body to its native form and keep the head in its human imitation form. So it would be a giant alien body with a tiny human head on it. And they can do that with any part of their bodies, shift specific areas between the native and imitation states without affecting the rest. You saw that in the photos earlier. So they have this polymorphic ability which allows them to imitate other creatures, but they can't imitate them spontaneously just by thinking it into existence. They can't spontaneously create forms that have a high level of complexity. They have to use technology to design them, basically from computer modeling programs. Then they imprint that code into their cells, probably through an electromagnetic process. When they switch their cells to the imitation state, they take on the characteristics designated by the imitation code. So the 3D computer model is generated in physical form. As I've said, they're not perfect imitations, and if you test the physiology and anatomy, it'll be clear that they're not human. I've told you how to identify them using that simple 3-part test, which anyone can do. First, you check for cartilage in the nose and ears. All humans have cartilage there, but Dracs don't. You can push the ends of their noses almost flat with very little resistance. There's no structure inside. It feels like a piece of rubber. Next, you check to see if they have real pores with sebaceous glands. When you squeeze human pores, they'll release sebum, either as a white paste or blackhead. But a Drac's imitation pores don't have glands. They're just empty pockets, texture in the skin. So when you squeeze them, nothing will come out. And since they don't have pores, they don't have hair follicles. They're imitating hair by forming the skin cells into fibers. That's the third test, plucking hairs to see if they have roots and follicles on the ends. When you pluck a human hair, it usually comes out with a root, and sometimes part of the follicle. But you won't get that from a drac. You won't see roots. Those are the 3 tests, checking for cartilage, sebaceous glands, and hair follicles. An autopsy or cellular examination would also prove that they're not human, but that would require someone who has training and experience in those fields. Anyone can do these 3 tests. Now we're going to take a close look at Benjamin Netanyahu's face, and this will prove that they don't have real pores or hair follicles. With this level of detail, you definitely see the pores on a human, but he doesn't have any. There's nothing on the nostril or tip of the nose, and the rest of it is just texture, empty craters in the skin. Look at the texture on his cheek. Human skin doesn't look like that. It has pores, but the surface is smooth for the most part, not covered with craters like this. He doesn't have hair follicles either. There's no stubble below the sideburn, where a man's beard would grow out. Any human you look at will have hair below the sideburn. Now I'm going to pan slowly across to his chin, and you'll see that there's no beard stubble anywhere on his face. No matter how close of a shave you get, you're still going to see the stubble. A few hours after shaving, it'll already be growing out. But there isn't a single hair on Netanyahu's face. The only way for a human to achieve this is by waxing, but that's not what this is. This is the head of a dragon that's taken the shape of a human head, but its physiology hasn't changed. It's still reptilian, and that's why it doesn't have real pores or hair follicles. Their polymorphic ability is obviously not natural. They modified their biology to make this possible, and by doing this, their intentions are clear. They want to imitate other sentient races so that they can infiltrate their societies and then take them over from the inside, put them under mind control, and become their rulers. That's what they did to our ancestors, and since then, we have been serving them as a thrall race. We are not a free people anymore. We have been taken over by these dragons, and all of our leaders are them. Now you know the true meaning of Jesus Saves. I am here to liberate humanity from this malevolent race by leading a military campaign to destroy them. As a consequence, it may also save you from your potential sins, because you won't be under the influence of their corruption anymore. This tells us that the children of Satan are physically present on the earth. I don't know if Satan is an existent deity like the God of Israel. He may be, and I assume he is. But at a minimum, he does represent this race as an archetypal figure. So even in that sense, he is real. And he's called a dragon or serpent because that's what they are. They are literally dragons. 10-foot tall hermaphroditic dragons with horns, claws, and tails. And I've shown you that. The mainstream view is that Satan is not a real presence in the world, that he's purely symbolic, representing the dark side of human nature. That's what the Dracs want you to believe. More than anything, Satan wants to convince you that he doesn't exist. For the people who don't buy that, they tell them Yes, Satan exists, and his forces are influencing us, but they're not physically present on Earth. They're demons or spirits that are possessing people and making them do evil. That's also a lie, though it's closer to the truth than the first explanation. As I've shown you, not only do they exist, they are physically present in this world. They're as physical as you and me. But they don't want you to know that, because then you can actually do something about it. You can kill them. So the objective is to destroy the children of Satan, these shape-shifting dragons that are masquerading as men. They are the root of all the evil in this world. As long as they're here, they will continue to manipulate and torment us. They control all the governments, corporations, financial institutions, media, every part of the system. They create wars to get humans to slaughter each other so they can harvest their souls and the pain and suffering of those who live through it. That's what their wars are really about. They're mass sacrifices. They control the economic cycles, creating depressions and crises to keep humans in poverty, while at the same time they profit. They're behind the terrorist attacks, which is about raising fear to control us, so that we submit to their authority and restrictions. Most of the viruses are created in their labs, and then they go out and spread them among the human population. That's been true throughout history. They put toxins in the food and water to dumb us down, make us more docile, and so that we're more susceptible to diseases and cancer. The pharmaceutical drugs they give us are designed to do the same thing, and they're supporting the illegal drug market as well. They're creating the weather and the disasters that come from that, and most of the earthquakes and tsunamis. These dragons are behind all of it. They've been the source of our destruction all along. So looking for one person to be the Antichrist is a joke. The entire world is the Antichrist. You're swimming in it. You're being manipulated by the children of Satan every moment of your life. The only world leader who won't be an Antichrist is me. They've given us an illusion that we're living free in a human world, but the reality is we're slaves. It's not physical slavery as you'd normally think of it. It's slavery of the mind. They created this false world to control us and break us down so that they can harvest our life force and souls. Just by living in this system, supporting its existence, we are helping our enemies to enslave us. We have been feeding this abomination with our blood and souls. We have been fornicating with the children of Satan, and now we have become accomplices to evil. That's the greatest sin of all, and the only way to cleanse ourselves is by destroying them. What Revelation is describing is a war between Israel and the empire of this alien race, which controls all the other nations. The woman obviously represents the 12 tribes of Israel, and the dragon is her enemy. He has 7 heads, each with a diadem or crown, and that symbolizes global dominance. There are many rulers, but they're all connected to the same body. They all serve the same agenda. And that's true of the world today. The Dracs control the leadership of every nation. National sovereignty is an illusion. They're all part of the same beast. Israel is no different. The Dracs run your government. As I've shown you, Benjamin Netanyahu is not human. He is a dragon imitating a human body. That's been true of all your prime ministers. and you'll find that all the other people in the top positions are Dracs. You are being ruled by your enemies. This is the same group that was behind the Holocaust. Hitler and the other Nazi leaders were all Dracs, and the pharaohs and kings of Babylon. They've been persecuting you throughout history. Now you know what it means by the synagogue of Satan. Not only are they not Jews, they're not human. And they're not just elites. You can find them at every level of society, any class, any profession. I'd expect that Israel in particular would have a large percentage of Dracs in the population, because that's the group that's the greatest threat to them. That's the group that they need to keep the tightest control over. So I wouldn't be surprised if as much as a third of the Israeli population are Dracs. Of course, in the major organizations, everyone at the top will be one of them. Even in the original Israel, while the kings were human, it's clear from reading the Bible that some of the advisors, priests, and prophets were Dracs. They were working to destroy Israel from the inside by corrupting the people and leading the kings to make bad decisions. They were the ones that led the people to worship Baal, who was Satan under a different name. So by the time Babylon took Jerusalem, the Dracs had already destroyed it on the inside. You're in the same situation today. You're still being led by these false shepherds. And unlike the original Israel, you don't even have human leaders anymore. You're completely under their control. And I believe that their plan is to ultimately set up Israel in a situation where it will be destroyed. Whatever their plans are, they're definitely against you. The first step is to liberate Israel from the hand of Satan. To do this, you will have to remove all of the Dracs from your government, and then I would become the leader of Israel. I need to be in that position to execute the rest of my father's plan. Once that happens, we will have to immediately begin preparing for war. The Dracs aren't going to tolerate Israel under my leadership. They won't tolerate any nation under human leadership. We'll be treated as a rogue state, and the rest of the world will be united against us. That's what this prophecy in Psalm 2 is describing. This is right after I become the leader. They're going to form a military coalition to attack us. That's the beast in Revelation. It has 7 heads like the dragon, so again this symbolizes a global hierarchy that governs all the nations. It's made up of parts from different animals, and that obviously represents different countries. I believe that the lion's mouth represents the United States, the bear's feet must be Russia, and the leopard's body is probably Europe. This also appears in the book of Daniel, except that it's 3 separate beasts. A lion, a bear, and a leopard. And there's a 4th beast which has 10 horns, just like the beast in Revelation. That's the coalition, and it will almost certainly come out of the UN. So when you see the United States, Europe, Russia, and China all united together against Israel, you'll know that all of those nations are puppets under the same hand. These verses in Psalm 118 are describing that situation, when the coalition comes to attack Israel, and the UN would represent all nations. In a broader sense, the beast is the New World Order, though it's not really new. Behind the illusion, it's always been a one-world government. One world under Satan. The difference is that the methods of control will become much more forceful. That would be the mark of the beast. They'll have to do that to force people into military service. Most countries will go under martial law, so the generals will be in charge at that point. They'll drop the illusion of democracy, and there won't be any more elections. The Great Seal of the United States shows you the true world order, as it's always been. The Whore of Babylon represents the Dracs in their empire, and she's the one controlling the beast. The main point of all of this is the military operation to attack Israel, so the 10 kings are likely to be generals chosen by the UN. They'll be given supreme command over their region, which will include multiple nations. That will allow them to bring the resources of those countries under a single chain of command, and they'll be able to coordinate their activities and combine their militaries into a single force. That's the point. These kings are only in that position for a short time because the coalition is defeated by Israel. In another passage it says that it lasts for 42 months, 3.5 years. I know how to prepare you for this war, but we can't win with Israel's current conventional military. It'll require the development of new types of vehicles and weapons. This prophecy in Revelation is describing these vehicles, which don't exist yet. At that time, he could only describe them as horses, but it's obvious that he's seeing military vehicles. The fire, smoke, and brimstone is gunfire from machine guns, and the tail is the main gun or launcher. It looks like a snake with a head because it's a barrel with a muzzle brake on the end, or possibly a missile. And the soldiers' multicolored breastplates are camouflaged body armor. Before I'd even read this, I was having thoughts of designing a vehicle like that, something that performs well in any kind of environment, especially in urban areas. They'll be small, fast, and maneuverable, and the main weapons can be fired on targets without a direct line of sight, so they can continue to attack from behind cover. They won't have much armor, so they'll rely on an active protection system for defense. The Israeli military already has 2 systems in use, Trophy and Iron Fist, so that would be integrated into the vehicle design at the time of development. Their speed and small size will also be a defensive advantage, as they'll be harder to hit with unguided weapons, and it'll be easier for them to find cover. They'll also have a tactical advantage in that they can outrun and outmaneuver enemy armor, so they can flank and use hit-and-run tactics, or just avoid engagements altogether. There will be 2 variants based on the same vehicle. One will be equipped with guided missiles to destroy armored vehicles and low-flying aircraft, and the other will have a mortar as its main gun to bomb areas with stationary or slow-moving targets and to destroy infantry and cover. It'll be a 2-man vehicle, a driver and a gunner, and the driver will have his own weapons up front, at least a machine gun. They'll be designed more like cars. They can be produced much faster and at a much lower cost than conventional armor. However, the 200 million number is totally unrealistic. He probably meant 2,000,000, which would be 2 million. Even that's a stretch, though it is possible given enough time. That means you need 4 million people just to man the vehicles, and that would be pretty much every able-bodied person in Israel. Some believe that this is talking about the coalition forces, but even if that's the case, 200 million vehicles is still way out of line with reality. Several of the prophetical books in the Old Testament describe this battle between Israel and the coalition. I consider Ezekiel 37 through 39 to be the greatest Old Testament prophecies because of their continuity and the number of details they contain in describing these events. Ezekiel 37 is a prophecy about the reformation of Israel, described as bones in a valley coming together and becoming living people again. That prophecy has been fulfilled. Ezekiel 38 and 39 are describing the time when the coalition forces come to attack Israel. That's the Battle of Armageddon in Revelation. Again, these horses are actually vehicles, and it says that they're all riding on horses, which you'd never see with a pre-modern army. So this is describing a modern army made up of vehicles. Of course, they do have infantry, but they're riding in trucks and APCs. They're not going to cross the desert and mountains on foot. The weapons that are described are also representative of modern-day weapons. Coming from that time, the closest analogy to firearms would be bows and arrows. The coalition forces are described as a cloud, so even in tight formations it covers a very large area. Considering that there are so many nations involved, that could add up to at least several million people. And when it says Gog or Magog, it means the rest of the world outside of Israel. That's used in Revelation as well. This is describing the battle, and it's clear that the coalition is annihilated. It says, "I'll leave but the sixth part of you." That's a debated translation, but if it is accurate, it means that the coalition will lose more than 80% of its forces. All of those countries will lose the bulk of their militaries in that one battle. So after that, they won't be able to take any further offensive actions against Israel. It'll also leave them short on defenses at home. Then it's possible for Israel to go on the offensive. We would send our forces to those countries to eliminate the Drac leadership and replace them with human leaders. That's the objective. Seeing the destruction of this massive force will put fear into the rest of the world, and it will prove to them that the God of Israel is real and that he is with his people. This is the same battle between Israel and the coalition, the beast, and it says that it takes place at Megiddo, which is in the northern part of Israel. That matches the prophecy in Ezekiel. The false prophet could be a president, prime minister, the head of the UN, a general, or even a religious leader, the Pope, or some believe the Mahdi. Whoever it is, he'll obviously be a Drac. This is the same beast described by Daniel, which I mentioned earlier. The small horn that speaks is the false prophet. He's the mouthpiece of the coalition, their front man. And the iron teeth are meant to show that its purpose is military action. As in the other prophecies, it says that the coalition is destroyed, and the New World Order with it. The nations that were part of the coalition no longer exist as world powers, but they continue to exist as nations. That's what the last line is saying. Here's another prophecy about this battle, though this one places it in the valley of Jehoshaphat, which is at Jerusalem, about 100 kilometers south of Megiddo. Given the size of these armies, you'd expect that this battle would take place on multiple fronts across a very large area. The coalition forces would keep moving south after the first engagement at Megiddo. It's possible that they could make it to Jerusalem, though they'd have lost most of their forces along the way. So this may define the full extent of the battlefield, from Megiddo to Jerusalem. Some of these so-called Bible scholars place this event in the time of the original Israel, but that's not possible, because they hadn't been scattered among the nations yet and then brought back. This is talking about Israel in modern times. These scholars don't want you to know the truth about this, and that's because they're dracs. Some of them even place Revelation in the past, saying that it's about the Roman Empire. That's ridiculous. This proves that it hasn't happened yet, because there are still aliens in Jerusalem. And by aliens or strangers, I think it means non-humans. The prophecies in Revelation indicate that Gentiles will be allowed into New Jerusalem, so it's not talking about human foreigners. It's talking about the dracs. Here's another prophecy that's talking about the same battle. This happens after the coalition is defeated in Israel. As I said, those nations won't be an offensive threat anymore, and they won't have much left at home to defend themselves. Then it's possible for us to go into those countries to take out the leadership. Obviously, the remaining military forces will have to be neutralized first. That's what this prophecy is describing. Just as we did in Israel, we would remove all of the dracs from their governments and replace them with humans. The dracs in the general population would also be identified and removed. So we would turn these drac-led nations into free nations with human leaders. It would be ideal if everyone could wake up on their own and see the truth. Then war could be avoided. But that's not going to happen. Most people are too deep under the mind control, and it's simply not possible to get through to them. They can't accept anything that doesn't conform to the controlled view of reality. In effect, the dracs have them under hypnotic command, so that the subconscious programming overrides the conscious mind. That prevents them from thinking about these things. They can only believe what the establishment tells them. They've been blinded to reality. As long as the dracs control the media, it's impossible to break that programming. So when we enter a country, one of our primary objectives is to take control of communications in the media, or shut it down if that's not possible. Once we have control of the media, we can show them the truth, that their leaders are not human. Babylon's greatest weakness is that its existence depends entirely on an illusion. It's all based on a lie, so everything that's built on that is a lie. It's evil pretending to be good, and the truth reveals it to be the abomination that it is. It's destroyed by the truth, and the violence is the physical manifestation of that. The sorcery is their polymorphic ability, which has allowed them to imitate us. That's the source of their deception. Without that ability, they wouldn't be able to control us. We wouldn't be in this situation right now. This is a prophecy from the book of Enoch, and again it's describing the same event. We know that the Watchers are the Dracs, and we know why they'd be afraid. This tells you that they're physical beings that can be killed. If they were demons or spirits, they'd have no reason to fear for their lives, because they can't be destroyed in this world. Like the other prophecies, it also talks about these disasters taking place, weather and earthquakes. I believe that all of these disasters will be created by the Dracs to retaliate against humanity. I have no doubt that they could set off earthquakes all over the world to create a global catastrophe. That's what it says in Revelation here. Most of these disasters will happen after the coalition is defeated, when they feel it's inevitable that they'll lose control over the human population. They'll try to kill as many humans as possible before they go. This prophecy in Psalm 46 is also talking about this period of time when these disasters are taking place. The Dracs will try to hit Israel with earthquakes and tsunamis, but they won't destroy it. The God of Israel will protect his land. What this is describing is an exodus of Dracs from the surface back into their underground cities. They've lost control of the human population, and they know that they'll be killed if they stay. So they have to wait for many human generations to pass before attempting to retake the surface, when people have forgotten about them. That's when they come back up and start infiltrating their societies. Since humans aren't even aware of them anymore, there's no risk of being identified. Eventually, they take over the leadership of those nations. Once they establish global control, they unite their forces and send them to attack Israel, just like the first time. And just like the first time, they're annihilated. Apparently, that's the end of the Dracs. Though in order to completely destroy them, we would have to get into those underground cities, and perhaps even the moon. The meaning of this parable is clear now. The tares are the Dracs. It talks about them being burned with fire, and the reason you'd have to do that is because they can regenerate. They can use their polymorphic ability to move the displaced cells back to their original positions to reform the tissue, so they can regenerate damage from physical attacks like bullets. The only way to stop the regeneration process is by destroying the individual cells. That's why you'd have to burn them. Here are two more prophecies that mention the use of fire. In reality, though, any major damage to the head would be fatal to them, certainly anything that creates a large exit wound. and they wouldn't be able to regenerate body parts that are severed or blown apart. That's also part of vampire mythology, how you have to dismember or burn them. And that's based on them, Dracula, son of the dragon. The alien in Carpenter's The Thing also regenerates, and the only way to kill it is with fire or explosives. In the book that it's based on, they use electricity to kill it, but that's not practical in reality. The Dracs are the source of the werewolf legends as well. In fact, it'd be very easy for them to create that appearance. All they'd have to do is revert to their native forms and then generate hair all over their bodies. A Drac covered with fur would look like a werewolf. Again, it's clear that this is talking about the Dracs. Whenever the Bible mentions the wicked, it means them. They are in great power right now, and have been for a very long time. They've dominated mankind for tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. It says they pass away, which makes it sound like they die off naturally, but we know that they're killed in the war. The chosen of Israel will inherit the earth by destroying the Drac rulership. That's what it really means. Revelation means to reveal, and that's what I've done. I've revealed the truth about what this world really is. That's what begins the course of events in Revelation. Only I can open the first seal. Without me, none of this happens. These prophecies wouldn't even exist. At this point in time, I can't explain everything that's in Revelation. For example, the metal locusts. I don't know what those are exactly, or where they'd come from. Some of these events can only be explained after they've happened, and that's because these prophecies originate from a future time. But I know exactly what the main point is. It's to go to war against the Dracs, to liberate this world from their control, and save the human race. I am Yeshua HaMashiach, the second coming of Jesus Christ. I am the one. All the others who have claimed this are liars. Any Jew who falsely made this claim would be killed by the God of Israel, so I know that these other claimants are Dracs. They can lie about anything, because that's their nature. They enjoy deceiving you. They're not telling you what I'm telling you, that we're being dominated by Satan and his dragons, and that I'm here to lead a military campaign to destroy them. You won't hear any of that from them. I have received my Father's seal. I know this because I've been feeling it happening over the last several years. It's a tugging or pulsating sensation in the middle of the forehead, almost like a muscle spasm, except that the muscles aren't moving. And it happens intermittently. It'll go on for a short time, a couple of hours up to a day or two, and then it'll stop for a while. And it may be several weeks before it comes back. There were a few times when I felt a strong jolt in my forehead, like something had suddenly shifted in the bone. It actually made me flinch when it happened. At the time I thought it had something to do with microwave or psychotronic attacks, but now I recognize that it's the seal. I've been having these sensations for over 3 years now, so it takes quite a long time to complete the process. At least that's true in my case. So if you're a male of Jewish descent and a virgin, and you've been having these spasm-like sensations in your forehead, then you're almost certainly one of the chosen. That's how you'll know. I'm no more than half Jewish, so you're not excluded just because you're biracial. It may even be possible with someone who's a quarter Jewish or less. Interestingly, my imposter mother kept bringing up that she sometimes had pulling sensations in her forehead, and she wanted to know if I felt something like that. Of course, she was lying. She didn't really have that. She just wanted to know if I was being sealed, but I never said anything. This is talking about New Jerusalem, and it says that there are no places of worship, churches, or synagogues, and that goes with my feelings about religion. I've always known that most religions are just systems of control. They have absolutely nothing to do with God. In fact, they have more to do with Satan. The Dracs control all of the major world religions. So again, everyone at the top of those organizations will be one of them. And most of the rituals they've established are black magic. Even if some of these religions were legitimate at the beginning, they've all been corrupted over time. So I have no use for religion. I honor my Father by doing His commandments. New Jerusalem doesn't have dogs in it either, and that's because I hate dogs. I've never been bitten, though I've had some bad encounters with dogs. I just don't like the barking and aggressiveness, and they're dirty. I don't see the point of having them around, so I wouldn't allow them in my city. What Jesus is saying here is that He doesn't have His own free will. He is bound to the will of His Father, and I've come to realize the same thing about myself. I don't have individual free will to do whatever I want. I am bound to do my Father's will and follow His commandments, and I must fulfill the prophecies exactly as they're described. If I deviate from His commandments, all of this will fail. It's hard to explain that objectively, but I know that it's true. I am a physical manifestation of His will in this world. I am part of Him, an extension of Him, but I am not Him in His complete being. The simplest way I can describe this is that I'm His hand in this world. He commands His hand to act, and His hand performs that action. The hand isn't going to act independently. It will always obey the will of the mind. That's the simplest analogy I can make. King David was one of His anointed, but he wasn't directly part of Him as I am. David had his own free will, and a number of times he acted against the will of his God. I can't do that. It wouldn't even come into my mind to do that. There are a number of prophecies in the book of Psalms that are about me, which describe personal events in my life. And those are Psalms 27, 31, 35, 40, 69, 102, 118, and 119. There are others, but those are the most relevant ones. This is another way that I can prove that I'm Him, and it'll help to explain my current situation. I'm not going to discuss all of them, but I'll go over the major events that have led me to this point. We'll start with Psalm 69. I have become a stranger to my brothers because the Dracs abducted me from my biological parents when I was an infant, and then I was handed over to a couple of impostors who pretended to be my parents. I spent most of my life with them, and it was only recently that I found out that they were Dracs. So then I knew that they weren't my real parents, and that I had been abducted. They couldn't kill me, so they had to set me up in a fake life to control me, where I'd be surrounded by them at all times. And now I know that it wasn't just my parents. All of my so-called relatives and friends were Dracs, and I can remember most of them shape-shifting. I just didn't know what it was at the time, but I do remember seeing it. So the Dracs have known that I'm Christ from the time I was born, and they were on me for 40 years, until I finally figured out what was going on. They were trying to keep me from knowing who I am and what I'm here to do, which is to destroy them. Now it's Psalm 27. When my father and my mother forsake me. That happened when I finally recognized that they were Dracs. I'd been seeing them shape-shifting for some time before that, but I was in a state of denial, and I didn't want to think about what that meant, since I believed that they were my parents. It got to a point where I couldn't ignore it any longer, so I confronted them. I even did those 3 tests on my imposter father, and he failed all of them. He also started shape-shifting right in front of me, so that left no doubt. The next day, they filed an involuntary commitment against me, and I was taken to the drug rehab unit of the Fry Medical Center in Hickory, North Carolina. Everybody in there was a Drac, the staff and the so-called patients. And they were trying to kill me, attacking me with microwaves, giving me drugs and tainted food, depriving me of sleep, and exposing me to viruses. Some of the prophecies in Psalm 35 and 69 describe my experiences in that place, and I'll discuss those next. While I was in there, I spoke to my imposter mother over the phone, and the last thing she said to me was, "You are dead to us." So I have been forsaken by my parents. Of course, they're not my real parents, but that's what the prophecy is talking about. As I said, they were attacking me with microwaves, and that's what this is talking about here in Psalm 35. It says, "I didn't know it." If you're being physically attacked, you would know it. So this is talking about non-physical attacks that you can't see or even feel, and that's true of microwaves. It won't kill you immediately, but if you're exposed to enough of it over time, it'll interrupt the bioelectric function of your heart and cause it to fail. They were trying to give me a heart attack, and towards the end that's what it felt like. If that had happened, there wouldn't have been an investigation, because it would have looked like a natural cause of death. Psalm 69 is also talking about my experiences at Fry. The food they gave me was tainted or rancid, and it made me sick after a while, so I had to stop eating for several days to clear my system. That's mentioned in the prophecies as well. They can't kill me directly with a bullet or lethal poison, but they can use indirect means that would ultimately lead to my death. Microwaves, drugs, tainted food, viruses, sleep deprivation. I had all of that in Fry. I was locked up in there for almost 30 days, and by the time I got out, I felt like I was at death's door. A few more days in there, and I probably would have died. This verse in Psalm 31 is also talking about Fry. That was all set up to kill me, and everyone involved was a Drac. After I got back home from Fry, I called a few people that I thought were my friends, but suddenly they didn't want to know me anymore. That's when I realized that they had set up everyone in my life. Parents, relatives, friends, they were all Dracs. They were just there to control me, and also break me down psychologically and physically. They were basically acting as handlers. These verses are describing my situation. Everyone has bailed out of my life, and now I'm completely alone. But that's actually an improvement from what I had before. Better to be alone than in the company of your enemies. Still, they took away any opportunity for me to have real friends, people that I could rely on. My enemies are ever with me. I just didn't know it until recently. Where I am now, most of the people I encounter are Dracs. This prophecy in Psalm 27 matches that. I'm supposed to be living in a place where I'm surrounded by Dracs. That's at the time when I'm delivered, when my people come and get me. I moved here with my imposter parents, and they're the ones that chose this place. Now I know the reason why. The law of your mouth is better to me than thousands of coins of gold and silver. This is talking about a decision I made to turn down a large amount of money. And I did that to uphold the prophecies which say that I'm supposed to be poor. And those are in Psalms 40, 69, and 86. The money came from a forced sale of the house I was living in, and that was in June 2015, about a year after I got out of Fry. I was on the deed with my imposter parents, and they wanted to buy out my share, but I refused. So they petitioned the courts for a forced sale and auction. They were the only bidders at the auction, and they bought it back for $120K. So the lawyer gave me a check for about $38,000. When I took the check, I had a terrible feeling, like I had died inside. I knew that if I took the money, it would definitely break the prophecies. I felt that I wouldn't be able to live with myself knowing that I had failed. So a few hours later, I decided to give the money back. And after I did that, the terrible feeling went away. So I knew that I had made the right decision. The Dracs wanted me to take that money because they knew that it would break the prophecies. At first, they refused to take the check back, but I kept insisting, and they finally did. I could have just thrown it away, but I wanted to resolve it up front. Interestingly, while I was arguing with the lawyer, he started shape-shifting and sticking his tongue out. So once again, everyone involved with that was a Drac. And at that point, I knew what they were trying to do. The world that you were led to believe in is a lie. It's all been fabricated by the Dracs to keep you under control. The reality is, you're not free. There is no democracy or national sovereignty, and your leaders are not human. The system is completely rigged, and all of the world events are staged. They've made up your entire existence on this planet, and this is what it's always been. You were just blind to it before. They had you in a trance where all you could see was the illusion, and now you've woken up to the nightmare of the real world. You are enslaved to a race of shape-shifting dragons that are imitating human bodies, and they are killing your soul. You are trapped in a living hell under the rule of Satan, and you have been fornicating with his children to your own destruction. That's what your life has been. My Father has sent me to save the human race from its damnation, but I obviously can't do that on my own. I need my people behind me. Israel, your God is calling you to battle. He wants you to fight this war to destroy Satan. This is the task he has given to this generation. This is the path he has set for you from the beginning. And this is the only way to salvation. This war must be fought. He has told you this repeatedly in the prophecies. You are his weapons of war, and his will is realized through your actions. I've done as much as I can do from my current position. I've taken the first step on my own by showing you the truth. But I can't execute the rest of my Father's plan until I get to the next level. I must become the leader of Israel. I need to be in that position to prepare the military and then lead you to war. That's the purpose of my existence here. That is my rightful place given to me by my Father. I am the King of Israel. I am the word and right hand of your God. When I speak, you are hearing his commandments. When I act, you are seeing his will being done. First, we must liberate Israel from the hand of Satan. We will have to remove all of the Dracs from the government, and then we will establish our own government under my leadership. The Dracs in the general population will also be removed, and the positions they held in their organizations will be taken over by humans. Israel will become the only human-led nation in the world, and then we will begin preparing the military, developing and manufacturing those vehicles and weapons. If the prophecies are accurate, we'll have at least 3.5 years before the coalition attacks, though it's likely that there will be some smaller conflicts in that time. Your God is trying to save you from this hell that you're in, but he can't do that if you don't listen and follow his commandments. By continuing to ignore him, you've damned yourselves. That's what he's saying here. It's your own ignorance that's caused you to fall into the hands of your enemies. His knowledge is the only light in this world. When you turn away from it, you're lost in the darkness. Understand that this is his last attempt to get through to you. You will not get another chance. He has sent me to lead you out of the darkness, but you must do your part to make this happen. I have done my Father's commandments and fulfilled all of the prophecies up to this point in time. I have passed my personal trial, and I'm ready to take the next step, to become the leader of Israel. But I can't magically put myself in that position. That depends on my people, whether they accept me or not. Only they can take me there. I'm the constant in this equation. I will continue to execute my Father's will without fail, if I'm given the chance. The people of Israel are the variable. They have free will, and they can choose to follow his commandments or ignore them. So the outcome actually depends on them, not on me. They will decide the fate of mankind, whether you become a free race or stay in the hand of Satan. As I said, the problem is the Dracs control all the major organizations. Obviously, they're not going to support me. They're going to denounce me. So it'll probably have to be a smaller independent group that takes me in. At this point, I'd be glad just to have a few people on my side, because so far, there's been no one at all. Not one of my people has responded since I first declared myself 6 months ago. In spite of that, I've continued to do this work to reveal the truth to you. And now it's complete. There's nothing more that needs to be said or shown. That's the truth in its entirety. and it will always stand, whether anyone believes it or not. I know that I'm on the correct path because I fulfilled all of the prophecies leading up to deliverance. It should happen, but if it doesn't, it's not my failure. If you refuse to accept the truth, there's nothing more I can do. I can't make this happen if no one else is willing to get involved. If you really are just cattle, then I can't save you. No one can save you. You'll stay in this cage forever. These prophecies match my current situation. I'm homeless, I have no income, and I'm out of savings and credit. All I have left is $20. As I said in my previous video, I was staying at the local homeless shelter, but I was forced to leave a few weeks ago, so I've been renting a room in a motel since then. And this is my last day. And then I'll be out in the street again, and I'll probably have to sleep in the park. I've also hit the term limit for EBT food stamps, so I won't be able to buy food after my current balance runs out. As it says in the prophecies, this has to happen quickly, or I'm going to starve. I believe that this is a test of faith that I need to go through, to trust that my Father will deliver me, as it says in the prophecies. I know that it's time for this to happen. This is the point of resolution. I'll either make it to my destination, or it'll end here. I need to know one way or the other. Israel, will you answer the call of your God, accept me as Mashiach, and take up his cause? Or will you deny him and continue to serve Satan? Here's my contact information. And since I don't have any money or transportation, I'll be around Murphy somewhere. I won't be going far.